We're just excited to bring in Jessi Pierce, good hockey gal, great media person from Minnesota, covers them for the NHL.com and the Bar Down Beauties podcast. Hey, Jessi, thanks for jumping on with us today and finding the time because I know how busy you are. You, if I'm not mistaken, were a Dean Evason fan. So I wonder what the last couple of weeks have been like for you. Yeah, that's why. Take us inside the Minnesota Wild and what this season's been like for them.
I mean, Bill Guerin said it off the cuff. You can't fire 23 of the players that are performing badly. Not that you could ever trade your way out of problems anyway, but Dean Evason was kind of the only chip and the only card that Bill Guerin could play. And he played at Minnesota, obviously very much underperforming to what they could be capable of. I think the last time they had played, aside from this win streak, was game number 1 against the Florida Panthers, which they won 2-0. But Minnesota just was struggling, and Dean Evason was trying everything he possibly could to get them out of that funk. He actually had switched up some lines. He was trying different systems for the power play units and for the penalty kill, both of which were atrocious to start the year. That was a big reason that Minnesota really struggled, is special teams was very bad. And I think that's why you saw obviously assistant coach Bob Woods go along with Dean. But Bill Guerin had to make that tough decision. He liked Dean Evason probably even more than I did. I was critical of Dean once in a while, but I did like Dean. And I think Dean knew himself that it wasn't his fault. And I think that's a big reason the players are performing the way they are, is because there's probably an element of guilt. They know they're the reason that this guy lost his job is because they weren't performing to their best. But good for John Hynes. He's come in and taken leadership of the squad and doing things the right way.
Well, and I guess that would be my next question. I mean, literally, I've been around the game my whole life, but I don't know what it would take to get these guys to play consistently every night. I don't know. That's why I'm sitting here and you're sitting there, not sitting on a bench somewhere. But I don't know who's got the magic answer. I don't know. Like with John Hynes, what is he doing anything different? Has he said he's doing anything different on this win streak or what?
I mean, to be fair to John, he hasn't had time to implement. There really isn't his thumbprint on this team yet. It's still very much Dean Evason's team, Dean Evason's system, unfortunately or fortunately not. I mean, they just, I think, needed to hear the messaging from a different voice. I kind of relate it to a parent, right? Mom and dad can tell me day in and day out that I'm doing something wrong. But when a teacher says it or a grandparent or somebody else says it, all of a sudden you listen, right? I think that's a little bit of what was going on because, again, John Hynes, I don't think has a different message for the guys. He doesn't have anything, a magic touch necessarily. And again, with the game schedule as it is, he hasn't had a moment to really practice and change things up too dramatically. And he didn't want to. John Hynes is still very much in evaluation mode. Lucky for him, he's evaluating a team that looks much better than what Dean Evason was working with.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I need to move on. That's been a large focus of today's show. But I've known Dean of Dean. He's a Winnipeg guy, played with the Kamloops Blazers league champion team in 1984. That's a hell of a long time ago, almost 40 years ago. And I just know that he's a good guy. Has he said anything publicly since the firing or not?
Yeah, he was actually on our Bar Down Beauties podcast this week. We caught up with him. He's incredibly positive because I think he recognized it wasn't his fault. And Bill Guerin had let him go and they embraced and both kind of shed some tears because it was just a very unfortunate circumstance. And he loves to say his mom had told him, it's not the first time you've been fired. It's not going to be the last time you've been fired. You can move on. So, I mean, he has a very positive attitude. The one thing is he knows he wants to coach in the National Hockey League again. And he's been very adamant on that, saying, hey, you know what? I don't want someone to lose their job, but I do want that opportunity. So he's keeping a pulse on it for sure. He said he's not cheering for the Minnesota Wild, but he's certainly watching the Minnesota Wild very closely, shaking his head a little bit, wondering why they weren't doing this when he was on the bench. But he's in good spirits all in all, because as you mentioned, Rod, great human.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for that. But I will say this, too. I had the Wild picked to miss the playoffs. Not that I'm any expert or not, but I just think they're on the slide. I mean, that's the other thing. Which Wild are they? The team that's on the 4-game losing streak or what they were before? Maybe they're just not that good. Has anybody thought about that?
I mean, I've been saying that since the beginning as well. I'm ready for the Wild to admit maybe they aren't just that good, and it's not. Bill Guerin's very distinct on saying this isn't a rebuild. They refuse to rebuild in Minnesota ever since Craig Leopold has owned the team. That's been a thing that they're steering very clear of. However, with the salary cap constraints as they are, with those buyouts, a rebuild or being honest with yourself and saying, hey, it's going to be a down couple years isn't the worst thing. I'm kind of over the good enough to make the playoffs, but not good enough to advance past the first round mentality. But Bill Guerin always pulls some magic out of his hat. The Central's a little tougher, I think, than everybody anticipated. So it will make it a little tougher, especially with Minnesota getting so far behind the 8 ball. Even despite this 4-game win streak, they're still 5 points out of a playoff spot as it sits. Yes, there's plenty of time, but they need to get these 2 points in every game almost from here on out. So it's going to be a tough go for them. I think they're going to keep pounding at it. Obviously, everybody wants to be successful in the year, but they've kind of screwed the pooch a little bit in their performance for that 7-game losing streak.
Could not agree more. Love the phrase. Never thought I'd hear it today. That. You must get this a lot from your audience about surprises. I just got it yesterday for our Panthers and Lightning podcast that we do. Who are the surprise teams? And I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised Nashville isn't better. Have you seen them live? I thought they'd be better this year. Actually, I had them picked to take that playoff spot and the Wild to miss, and that doesn't look like that's going to happen.
The past couple seasons, for whatever, I'm always high on Nashville every year entering. I'm like, they should be better because on paper, they're a solid squad and they're playing a little bit better. They're playing better than they did maybe last year after some of the offseason. So for Minnesota go into Nashville and take that was certainly a big win. But yeah, Nashville always surprised me. Again, I don't know why I'm always putting my chips in their basket because I just have this belief in them. And yet every year it's a little bit of a letdown. It's a little bit of a disappointment. Preds, I want you guys to do something. Just go ahead and do it eventually. And maybe one year it'll pay off for us, Rod.
Yeah. Well, hey, lastly, tonight's game, Wild at Vancouver. What has you excited about this game?
I think this game is going to be Minnesota's biggest test on this win streak. I mean, beating Chicago is fine. Calgary was playing well, so for them to go into Calgary and win was not a statement win, but it was a good win. Vancouver is hot, hot, hot. I love that for Brock Besser, a Minnesota boy of our own, but their offense is just rolling. I think I saw they have 10 goals more than any other NHL team. And Minnesota's goaltending has kind of been a little shaky. Their defense had been shaky too. Goaltending's been better as of late, but I think it's going to be the biggest test tonight against such a red hot offense in Vancouver. I'm excited to see what happens. Minnesota's playing with some speed and pace that I think could almost match Vancouver's, but it's going to be certainly their biggest test on this road trip. So I'm just excited to see what they're actually made of, see what John Hynes can do to counter Vancouver. Should be a good tilt this evening in Vancouver.
Yeah, there's a case to be made. That's the game of the night. Where can people follow your stuff, Jessi?
You can follow me on Twitter at Jessi, Jessi_Pierce. Bar Down Beauty's new episodes drop each and every Tuesday. As I mentioned, Dean Evson, our guest, we got to the bottom of a lot of fun stuff like why he punches coaches on the bench. So be sure to give that a listen, and you can see my written work at NHL.com.
How about that?
Good stuff, Jessi. Hey, we're on Team Jessi, as you know. Happy holidays. I probably won't talk to you before Christmas. So all the best. We'll talk to you in the new year.
Thanks, Rod.
Minnesota hockey reporter Jessi Pierce.